For Public Company Research Project number 3, we're going to be applying the information that we've learned about in this unit, namely the information about inventory or the information about internal controls, to your selected company. Again, what we're trying to do is take the things you're learning in the unit and just do our best to kind of let you look at your company and just kind of see that stuff in action as much as you can from the 10K. In terms of steps to follow, the most important thing is that you get a link to the most recent 10K. You've done this multiple times now, so hopefully this is not going to be a new thing for you. You can just make sure you're finding the most recent 10K. You're not looking at a 10Q. Once you've found that 10K, then you can prompt your selected AI LLM. You can use the same one you used for Public Company Research Project number 2, or you can pick a different one. It's entirely up to you. But regardless of which one you choose, you need to ask the question, your chosen question, to the AI. Now, just a point about your chosen question, it's every company is going to have an internal control possibility. The inventory piece is the one that depends on the company. Some companies have inventory and some don't. So you just want to make sure your company has inventory. You can even have AI help you with that question if you'd like. But regardless, you just want to make sure that you're not answering the inventory question if your company doesn't have inventory. But here's what I did. I did the same thing I did before, which is, can you tell me which inventory method my company uses? And then it said, sure, which company are you researching? Now, depending on which LLM you're using, it may remember your previous research. It may remember that you were looking at the fiscal year end for a company. That's totally normal behavior for these. It usually has a pretty good memory for what you've done in the past. And so for my purposes, I just kind of restarted it every time just so I could get a fresh look. But I told it what company I was using. Now, again, you can use the other method as well. And I asked it both questions. I asked it about inventory, and then I also asked it about internal controls, which is the second question. Now, this is, in my opinion, a lot less interesting of a question, mostly because most companies end up with the same answer. As opposed to FIFO and LIFO, there is some variance. If you choose to do the internal control question, you could do it the same way I did. You can say, tell me what the auditors have to say about internal controls. And then it can say which company. You can go through the same prompting for either. I just kind of showed one in each method. Regardless, you need to get an answer from your chosen AI LLM of what their answer was. Their answer to the question. For my purposes, I got an answer about the inventory method. You can see it says the company uses last in, first out for a substantial portion of inventory. The remaining inventory is carried at lower cost market using FIFO. And then it gives us some information, none of which I asked for, but it did give us just some additional information here. For the internal control question, it told me about the audit opinion, and it says the auditors stated, in our opinion, the company maintained. It does give me the information that I'm looking for. It does give me an answer to the question, as well as giving me a bunch of other information that maybe I didn't necessarily need. But regardless, it did answer the question. Again, that's an important piece. You need to make sure you have an answer from the ILM so that you can answer, were they right? Did they give you the correct information? So you can check. If you're doing the inventory method question, then I would start here. You have two choices. You can use the search box to search for inventory. That's an option for you if you want. You're going to get a lot of potential hits. So I wouldn't necessarily suggest doing that, but you can. You could also use a search box to search for FIFO or LIFO or weighted average. One of those three terms should be in there, but who knows where you're going to end up if you do that. What I would suggest you do is utilize the power of this formatted HTML document that you're using here and click on sections. That should expand and show you essentially a table of contents for the whole 10K. And for my company, there was a description of business and summary of a single. Most companies, this is what they have. They have this section right below the financial statements that kind of lists out all their significant policies. It lists out their depreciation policies and their inventory policies. Now, that's not always where this information is going to be. You may have to look somewhere else potentially. If they have an inventory footnote, it should be in there. If it's not in this section, this is from my 10K. And if you look closely, if you were to go back and look at the answer that the AI gave me and look at this answer, they're not really the same. Like, I would write that it was wrong. I believe that it created and filled in its own gaps, which AI and LLMs have a tendency to do that. If they will talk even when there's no need to talk, and they will answer questions that you didn't ask. And sometimes that means they're giving you incorrect information. And they did that here. I believe they gave me more information than I looked for, and they ended up giving me kind of, information that they just kind of created out of nowhere. Hallucinations is what they call it when an AI does that. And the AI did hallucinate for some of the answer, in my opinion. If I was using this on a project, I might have asked it and said, where did you get this information from? And sometimes it'll say, yeah, that's not right. And sometimes it'll own up to it. Or it'll say, yeah, here's where I found that. But for our purposes, just take the answer they give you and compare it to what the financial statements say. Now, in this example, the one I have here, it says they use LIFO, approximately 95% are under LIFO retail. It doesn't give me the other method here, which is where I disagreed with the AI answer for my particular situation. Most companies, it's really straightforward. It just says we use FIFO, we use LIFO, we use weighted average. So that's what you can use to compare to the question given to you by AI. Again, look for LIFO, FIFO, weighted average. Look for the terms that are in your text that you've learned about in this unit. That's the whole point of this, is for you to be connecting what's here to what you learned in this unit. Don't forget your page number. Again, your page number would be on the page here. I looked down here. There's usually a page number printed on the page. Sometimes that doesn't match the page number that's listed on the page reader. It doesn't really matter which one you use, as long as you give your instructor some sense of what page. It's usually better to use the one that's printed on the page, but as long as you give them some sense of where you looked, that should be enough information. So that's essentially your third step for inventory. If you're trying to evaluate the inventory answer given to you, then you can go to the part of the notes that talks about which method they use and figure out what method they use. If you're doing the internal control question, to verify the AI LLM answer, you need to look for, and this is specific language that should be in every 10K, like this one is every 10K should have a report of independent registered public accounting firm. There's a report that's required to be on every public company 10K, and that's the report you should look for. It might be in the table of contents. If you click on the table of contents, it might be right there. Usually it is found either above, right above or right below the financial statements. If you can't find it, you can use your search box in Edgar. You might even say, hey, AI LLM, where is the audit report in the 10K? I can't find it. And it might be able to help you. Use your tools to help you with the assignment. That's what we're wanting you to do. Regardless, once you find it, once you find the report, look at it and read it. And it should give you specific statement about the internal controls. It's right here. In our opinion, the company maintained in all material respects effective internal controls. Now, that's a lot of big words. I'm not saying that you need to be able to interpret all those words, but you know that it said that it maintained effective internal controls. That's the opinion of the auditors. And see if that opinion, as listed in the 10K, agrees with what your AI LLM, the answer that it gave you. Again, that's your job in this assignment, is to evaluate the AI/LLM answer and compare it to the actual facts of the situation. Don't forget your page number. Again, the report is listed on a page. In this case, it's on page F2 for mine. And so write down the page number. Again, this is just to make sure that you were looking in the right place. So your instructor can verify as well as they can kind of your thought process and where you were. So there you go. In order to get full credit for this assignment, you need to make sure that you list out which AI/LLM you used. You need to summarize their answer. Again, this one is, with the fiscal year, and you could have just typed in January 31st, but with this one, it's going to be a little harder, and we don't want you to have to sit there and type it all out, which is why we're offering the option to cut and paste or do something just to put the answer in to your response in Blackboard. You also need to include your evaluation of the AI response, and then a link to the 10K along with the page number where you found the information. And just remember that we're just asking you to do one of the two questions. Do your best. If you have questions or if you're having trouble finding the information, reach out to your instructor. I'm having trouble finding the audit report. I'm having trouble finding what I'm looking for. And try to use your tools. But if your tools aren't helping you, if you're having trouble, just reach out to your instructor. We would much rather you reach out to us before the assignment's due or before you turn it in, rather than us having to go in after the fact and realize, okay, the student was obviously not where they needed to be, and because then we have now we have, issues with responses and grades and all this kind of stuff that we would much prefer not to have. So again, reach out to your instructor if you have questions, and good luck as you continue on with your public company research project.